ByteDance just dropped a new model called USO. With just a single reference image, you can instantly copy either its style or content and apply it to new generations. It's almost like a lazy man's universal LoRA, since you don't have to do any training. It's fast, flexible, and built for anyone who wants a quick, high-quality style transfer with some character consistency. I'll show you how to set it up and review some of the results. Let's get into it. Let's first take a look and see what USO is. On their project page, you can see that it stands for Unified Style Subject Optimized, and it's basically a model that uses style or subject generation on top of the Flux codebase. Their project page actually has lots of examples of how it works and different looks that it can do. Broadly speaking, it can do three different things. The first thing is a little bit like context, where it takes a reference image and then uses the subject inside that reference image to make new generations. So the first few examples on their page here, you have like a character, a cartoon character in multiple situations, and then another two with real life characters, and then they prompt for different situations and styles. So this one is more for character consistency. The second main thing it can do is the style transfer. You give it a reference image again, except this time you want new generations to use that style. It's really good at taking the details and the look of the image and then creating new ones, and it really tries to keep the color palette the same. And then lastly, it's more of a hybrid mix. And the mix is a couple of ways. So you can give it two different style images and it'll generate like a hybrid version of that style with new prompts. Or you can give it a subject and then a style, and then it'll try and recreate both of them. So it takes the character and then takes the style and then recreates it in new situations. The style transfer wasn't that easy to do in context, so we'll see if USO is better at it. Okay, let's start off with some of the models. If you've used FluxDev before, then you won't need to download too many models because that's the base model that it uses. So if you don't already have FluxDev, you can grab the FP8 model from Kijai. Again, these workflows are for people with around 8 gigs of VRAM because that's what I have. And I found that FluxDev FP8 actually runs just as is on my 8 gigs of VRAM. So I never really got the GGUFs for FluxDev. So just download this one and put it in the diffusion models folder. And then next, from the Flux Creo page, we're going to grab a couple of the other essentials. These will be the two text encoders, so the Clip L and the T5XXL FP8 version, and then put these in the text encoders, and then the VAE. These are just the base files that you'll need for FluxDev. And then finally, specific to USO, we have a couple of new files. So the first is the USO LoRA. You need to download this and put in the LoRA folder, and another one for model patch, which is the USO projector. And then lastly, a clip, the SIG clip vision patch. Just make sure you put them all in the correct folders inside ComfyUI, and then that's it. You're set to go. Okay, let's get into the workflow. As always, before you start, just make sure you're on the latest nightly version of Comfy. So just make sure you're on the update for the nightly version, and then do an update all if you haven't already. Once you've done that, there's a default USO workflow template from Comfy that I've opened here and then modified a little bit. There's a couple of new nodes, so just follow along, and I'll try and explain as best I can. So starting from the model loading part, I've edited it a little bit from the default. The default workflow uses one checkpoint, which includes the clip and VAE inside it. The file's a little bit bigger and you have less control over how you want to set things up. And if you ever want to switch out the regular FluxDev with another dev variant. So for me, I've broken it up into the individual components and then loaded it that way. So we have the standard load diffusion model, put the FP8 version of FluxDev in here, and then just leave it as default. The dual clips, you put the T5XXL and then the Clip L in here as well. Make sure you have Flux selected and then device CPU or default. And then the VAE is pretty straightforward. Just put the VAE in here. The three other new files for USO is placed in the next section. So load LoRA model. You want to put in the LoRA for the USO in here. Strength model just one. Then the model patch loader. You put the projector file in here. And then the clip vision, the other clip vision file that you've downloaded, put it in here as well. So those are all the models loaded. This time I'm just going to start with the clip loader with the conditioning and the prompt first, and the VAE before I get into the models, because those will go down and then be a little bit more complicated. So the clip loaders are pretty standard. The clips connect to your prompt. Since it's FluxDev, there's only a positive prompt required. So you only have one prompt box. That also goes into a conditioning 0 out to make a negative prompt. And then the negative prompt gets fed directly into the K sampler, whereas the positive prompt goes through the usual flux conditioning. This goes into a subgraph node right here. If you see these in ComfyUI, you can click on this little icon and it'll bring you into what the the inside graph looks like. So there's a couple of graphs combined into one on the outside, but it does use the usual flux guidance. And then there's a couple of other references for flux context as well. But basically that just gets combined into the USO reference conditioning. That's for your positive prompt. This takes into account the image that you're sending in for reference, and then you add it to the prompt, and then all of that gets fed into the positive K sampler prompt. The VAE is also pretty straightforward. That gets connected to the VAE decode over here on the output side. And then in addition, the VAE gets added to the VAE encode when you're encoding the image into a latent. Okay, now for the model. So the load diffusion model first goes from the model output into the LoRA. So that's pretty standard. Then once it loads the LoRA, the model then moves down from the LoRA into the USO style reference, which will then be used when combined with a few other things. The other inputs it needs are clip vision, image, and the model patch. Clip vision and model patch are obviously from the model loaders here. So the model patch goes into your model patch here, and then it goes into a second set of style references as well. And then the clip vision goes into the clip vision here. Again, the USO style reference is made up of multiple nodes. So if you want to see what's inside, you can click it, and you'll see a couple of different nodes combined together. But you'll notice there's two style references here because in the hybrid model, you can give it two different references, and it'll try and combine and then create a new image based on two style references. Right now, for most of my generations, I've just bypassed it, the second one, and you can leave it bypassed as well if you're just doing simple generations with one style. So the last input into the USO style reference is the image, and that image comes from the load image. But this one basically is your first style reference. Pick whatever image that you want to style it after, and then plug it into here. The load image beside this is for subject reference. So these two nodes, you can load your subject. So what I'm doing here is I want to take this landscape picture as a reference, and it's just a regular photo, and I want to apply this art style to it. The subject reference also goes through a image scaler. There's a note from ComfyUI on the bottom here. It looks like the default size for the reference subject image is 512 pixels. But from Comfy's own testing, sometimes they found some proportion issues when the new image is generated. I saw that as well. It doesn't really keep proportions and positions as consistent as flux context, for example. And sometimes you still get like a really big head or a really small head, etc. So you can play around with those two sizes to see what looks better. Your style image then gets fed into the VAE encode as a reference, and then that gets fed through the prompt. The output for the USO style reference, so while the subject image gets fed through the prompt, the style reference gets fed through as a model. So after the initial model load and the LoRA, and then filling it in through the style reference, the model gets output twice, right, to the second style reference, and then from there, so that model goes into the Easy Cache, which is another new node by ComfyUI. It's actually a pretty cool node. And it can help speed up generations by quite a bit. If you're interested to know more about Easy Cache and how it works with a few other different models, just let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do another video on this by itself. The Easy Cache basically will reduce the amount of steps required. Even though it uses 20 by default, it will check, and if the output is already pretty much close to what it's expecting, it will bypass a whole bunch of steps. So maybe out of the 20, it skips the last 7 or 8, and then you're done on steps, 13. This model then gets fed into the K sampler, and it's pretty standard. So for now, you leave it at the flux default of 20 steps. CFG1, sampler is Euler, simple, scheduler, and then denoise at 1. Then the output latent goes into the VAE decode, and then it gets saved as an image. So from that example here, just a quick one. So the reference image is a Studio Ghibli style image, and then using the photo of the landscape, the output is that landscape photo, but with that art style. So it's pretty simple and easy to do. It keeps the color palette, of the style image, so it brightens it up. The clouds look quite similar to the watercolor style of the reference image, and then same as the rest of the grass and mountains. So for this test one, I didn't even use a prompt, and you don't need to use a prompt if you're just doing a style on top of a reference picture. You can give it a prompt and change the scene slightly. And then it will still use your reference picture, but then also use the style that's in the style reference to generate something completely new. The other way you can use USO is just as a style reference. So in this case, the nodes that you don't need are the reference subject nodes. And these ones I've colored in red. So anything in this red color, you can just bypass. So you can do this, bypass these 4 nodes. And what you have is just a reference style that you're looking for, and then the prompt, and then you can generate a new image based on that reference style. So if I quickly just jump over to this other workflow, this is how it's set up. These 4 nodes are bypassed. I only have one reference image of a comic book style. And then with the prompt, I have a simple prompt, Jedi Knight. And with that, it can generate the Jedi Knight in that comic book style, which is pretty cool. So that's it for the workflow. Let's take a look at some of the outputs. Okay, so here are some of the outputs that I've gotten with my testing. The first one is just another variation on the comic book style previously. So again, the style is very consistent, similar drawing style, comic book style, and it's using the same reference. So the color palette, etc. is all quite similar to the last one. One of the stills from the intro and the thumbnail. So this one was using more of a 90s anime as a style reference, and then an image of a person, and that's the output that I got. The armor is not quite as flat as some of the anime, but the way it redid her face and the color flat shading here is a little bit similar to the 90s style. It just needs some film grain, I think. And this one was with no prompt, so it's just taking the style reference and applying it to the content subject image. Here's one testing out just the subject transformation. It's actually pretty good at keeping the details of the subject. The reference images of this photographer, obviously it's been generated on Flux, the camera's a little bit messed up, but the prompt was just to make the woman is walking through a busy outdoor market, and it does do that. Keeps the same clothes, backpack, lanyard, all the stuff from the original image, and then replaces the background with like an outdoor market. It's actually pretty well done. Then we have another one with a reference style and a subject, this time with a prompt as well. So it's another manga or anime style. And the prompt is the car speeding along the road, anime speed effects to enhance speed. So that last bit was just to add the effects that it had in the original source reference. It does change the position of the car slightly, but overall it looks pretty good. Like the background becomes more hand-drawn. The realistic shading and details of the car, they don't really remove that. But the rest of it, the road, everything else is more hand-drawn. Then a couple of other styles, Chinese watercolor. So this was the style image. Then the prompt was a dog lying in the grass. So it took that style and recreated the painting. It even like tried to copy some of the stamps and things. But I think this one looks pretty good. And then similarly using the style reference, but giving it a subject image. So it applies that watercolor style onto the subject photo and then turns it into this one from a scene from Star Wars. It's actually kind of cool. The color palette again uses the one from the style reference. But everything's turned into kind of watercolor ink style painting. And then for the last one, another classic 90s style movie animation. This one with a prompt, a woman with a sword. And it does keep that kind of same kind of color palette background style for the background, and then parts of the facial features of the style of the drawing. The only drawback is I think sometimes the model makes it a little bit more detailed than it needs to be. And obviously it looks a lot cleaner than an older version. But hopefully that gives you an idea of what USO model can do. Pretty easy to copy one style to another photo or another image, and also does a pretty good job of just subject consistency. So hopefully you found that useful. Give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I'll catch you in the next one.